Welcome to the Ultimate Ukraine channel. Russian President Vladimir Putin recently expressed his willingness to negotiate on the invasion of Ukraine. While Russia is creating a completely different plan on the front, it seems impossible to see Putin's statements within a framework of sincerity, because he still wants Donbass, Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Crimea for himself. However, at the point where the war came, almost 60% of Zaporizhia has been cleared of the Russian army. In the western part of the Dnieper River in Kherson, no Russian soldiers can travel anymore, and it is clear that the Russian army has serious problems in Donbass. In the midst of these problems experienced by the Russian army, the war in Bakhmut causes the hottest conflicts in the region. However, it does not go unnoticed that Ukraine has made progress for Crimea, which it has set its sights on after Kherson. Especially in the last week, most of the Russian troops in Zaporizhia had to flee or retreat towards Melitopol. It is observed that the Ukrainian armed forces has entered into a very serious restructuring in the region. The main reason for this is the preparations for the attack on Melitopol. When we look at the developments in the region, the Ukrainian armed forces are destroying the Russian military bases and defense mechanisms in Melitopol, just like they did in Kherson 3 months ago. These attacks should be interpreted as the harbinger of a ground offensive operation that the Ukrainian armed forces will carry out on Melitopol in the near future. In this direction, the Ukrainian armed forces established a very strong partisan information network, especially in Melitopol. Ukrainian partisans sometimes blew up the logistics points of the invading Russian army and at other times transferred critical information to the Ukrainian Special Operations Forces. The information about the secret base of Russian FSB analysts in Melitopol, which was destroyed by Ukrainian HIMARS last week, was also provided by Ukrainian partisans. In Melitopol, the Ukrainian armed forces carried out a series of strong attacks. But something incredible happened today in the attacks on Melitopol. A Chechen headquarters, described by Russian President Vladimir Putin as special fighters, and which Chechnya leader Kadyrov could not rave about, was blown up in the Tokmak region of Zaporizhia. While this attack of the Ukrainian armed forces dealt a serious blow to the operational power of the Russian army, it also created a new story of destruction of his troops, which Kadyrov claimed did not suffer losses. Except for Tokmak in the Zaporizhia region, the headquarters of the Russian occupation forces was hit by an attack by Ukraine. It is reported that a group of Kadyrov soldiers are now at the scene. The attack was carried out around 11 o'clock in the evening. Local sources reported that a large number of Chechens were burnt in their sleep, along with the headquarters of the occupation forces. The information was later confirmed. The scattering of these Chechen soldiers, also known as Kadyrovites, has once again revealed a fact that we all know. Russian President Vladimir Putin has always used Chechens on the front line and in critical areas throughout the war. Considering that Russian targets in the Zaporizhia region have been hit many times in the last month, the fact that Putin used Chechens as cannon fodder has been recalled. For this reason, in the last few months, there has been some opposition in his country against the Chechen leader Kadyrov, and Kadyrov could not find soldiers to support Russia. However, Kadyrov made statements contrary to all these events with the statements he made the other day. He spoke as if everything that came out was a lie, and the Russian army was victorious in Ukraine. The Chechen leader reported huge losses in Ukraine, while he says his fighters cleared Soledar. According to Ramazan Kadyrov, regular victories in combat encouraged Chechen fighters. Kadyrov made a big claim, saying that Akhmet's special forces systematically cleared Soledar, that Ukrainian forces suffered significant losses. He said, "Our fighters, led by a brave commander from an Akhmat special operations unit nicknamed Hunter, continue to clear NATO and Nazi Ukrainian soldiers in Soledar. They attack enemy positions one by one with heavy mortar fire and inflict significant losses on the enemy. As a result, they are liberating neighborhoods one by one from NATO slaves while resolutely purging Soledar of its unwanted presence." To describe these statements by Kadyrov, we can only use the word tragicomic, because there was no period when the Russian army gained courage. They have been losing regularly since the first month of the war. Immediately after catching the Ukrainian armed forces by surprise, they captured some areas very quickly. But the last 6 months represent a great destruction for the Russian army. We know that the morale of Chechens is much worse than that of Russian soldiers, because in addition to being used as cannon fodder at the front, they are also exposed to racism by Russian soldiers. In the intelligence reports published throughout the war, there were clashes between Russian soldiers and Kadyrovites. It was also stated that the Kadyrovites even entered into armed conflict with several Russian units and disrupted the Russian army order. However, Chechen leader Kadyrov's loyalty to Russian President Vladimir Putin means that Kadyrov's Chechens continue to fight in the region. Kadyrov assured that it will be a part of Russia as long as Putin is alive, and when Putin leaves, Chechnya will be a free country. It should be noted that Putin and the leader of the Chechen region, Ramzan Kadyrov, came to an agreement in which the Russian president will give everything: money, opportunities, orders, prosperity, everything. In return, Chechnya will remain part of Russia, but will become a free country as soon as Putin is gone. With or without Kadyrov, it is sure to happen soon, because it is a separate country that has nothing to do with Russia. The situation is different, everyone knows that. It was Putin who gave the order for the murder of Kadyrov's father. Kadyrov himself knows this, but right now, Kadyrov continues to stand by Putin because of the favors and the position Russia grants on him. But Russian President Vladimir Putin, who uses his words and signals to create a formidable power vertical that we believe controls every element of his government, has little to say as the new year approaches. On December 12th, the Kremlin cancelled Putin's annual press conference for the first time in a decade, and the nation's state speech in parliament was postponed with no sign of a new date. According to government officials, the course of Russia's war in Ukraine was a very serious contributing factor. None of this should come as a surprise. Last month, Russian troops had to withdraw from the right bank after a fake referendum declared Ukraine's Kherson region to be Russian. The way it was done was also significant. One would think that a sullen president made the announcement in a special televised episode. However, no such thing happened. Instead, General Sergei Surovikin, Russia's commander in Ukraine, advised Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu to withdraw, citing logistical difficulties, and Shoigu agreed. While all this was happening, Putin was nowhere to be seen. Is the president of Russia losing control? That would be an appropriate question to ask, but better yet, how much control did Putin have in the beginning? General Surovikin was appointed commander of Russia's special military operations in October and included Russia's most ardent pro-war figures, the Chechen leader Ramzan Kadyrov, whose forces are fighting in Ukraine, and businessman Yevgeny Prigozhin, who controls the Wagner private military company. The problem lies here. Officially, General Surovikin controls the military operation in Ukraine. In practice, however, Kadyrov could veto any order he gave the Chechen troops, and Prigozhin could do the same for his mercenaries. This creates great fiction in the coordination of the Russian offensive, but this situation is not new. The power and influence that names like Kadyrov and Prigozhin have today have emerged over the years thanks to Putin's propensity for over-authorization and leaving his dirty work to non-state actors. When Vladimir Putin isn't sure how well any effort will go, it's best not to be seen making the decisions, or he'll have to respond to them. Today, as in the past, Putin seems to be stepping back into the shadows so that others can take responsibility for the crisis unfolding under his watch. Especially in the explanations we mentioned at the beginning of the video, it serves this purpose. Putin delegated the difficult task of economic mobilization to Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin and to a lesser extent, Moscow Mayor Sergei Sobyanin, while allowing General Surovikin and Shoigu to take full ownership of the military side of the war. From a purely strategic perspective, Putin may be stepping aside, strengthening Russia's position, leading to a consolidation of the line of contact as generals like Surovikin follow reality on the ground rather than being forced to follow unrealistic and vague rules. But from a political standpoint, Putin's absence is conspicuous and makes him weak, feeding the pattern of disappearance in the midst of difficult decisions. Officials confirmed through his press secretary that Putin would not attend the day it was announced that he would withdraw from Kherson on November 9th, after implying that he had not decided whether to attend the G20 summit in Bali earlier in the month. When this situation is interpreted, in fact, Putin is taking the responsibility by stepping into the background in the war he knows he will lose. However, this may pave the way for Kadyrov and Prigozhin, who gain strength in the Kremlin, to lead the country into a political conflict. These two names have become very powerful, and their privileges are too many. We can see a period of redistribution of cards in the Kremlin. Thanks for watching.